We're at the Symphony. We're at Heinz Hall in the Grand Tier lobby here. It's so fantastic to have Carlos Simon with us. We're going to hear your ring shout this weekend with Manfred Honeck and the Pittsburgh Symphony. I'm Jim Cunningham from WQED FM. Carlos, welcome. We're thrilled to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jim, and I'm so excited to hear this piece in this historic hall and just to work with the orchestra this week. It's really a pleasure.
I heard the tail end of the rehearsal. It seemed like it was going well.
That's an understatement. This is the second time the orchestra has played this piece or rehearsed it, and yesterday in the rehearsal, it sounded like they had played it 100 times already. Just the level of playing and the musicianship is unmatched. I think it's really, really incredible. So I think when the rehearsal, is really amazing, but the performance, oh my gosh, I can't wait.
We like your music. We've heard several of your pieces as first-time events here at Heinz Hall, so I'm glad we've got you here for this one, and it's exciting that it will be recorded as well.
Yeah, and it's always really incredible to have a commercial recording of one's work, because it provides a sort of a definitive interpretation, if you will, of the piece, which is why I wanted to be here this week to really ensure and to just kind of hear, what the piece would sound like on recording, because, I cherish these recordings that, Rachmaninoff was playing piano or Gershwin was in the room, and, because that's like they put their stamp of approval on the recording, and it's the way they wanted to be performed. So I do consider it a luxury to be, in the building, to have an interpretation on wax, as they say.
But you've heard it played by the Boston Symphony. Not bad there.
Yes, of course. They commissioned the work, and 2 years ago, actually, in February, and they took it on tour in Europe for about 3 weeks and played it in London, Royal Albert Hall. They played it in Lucerne, Switzerland, and so many other historic European halls. And I heard it a lot, but it's always good to hear it many, many, many times here in the States.
Were you able to travel along on the tour?
I did. I came for a few of those dates, especially the one in London in the BBC Royal Albert Hall, and it's really special, really special.
Was that at the Proms?
It was at the Proms, correct.
Fantastic atmosphere there. They call it the greatest music festival in the world.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. And I was really happy to see the piece was received well. And so I was really excited, really exciting time.
And it's interesting that American music doesn't always travel with our American orchestras across the ocean. For whatever reason, Europeans have been slow to pick up even Copland, Samuel Barber. They don't hear it so much.
Sure, and I wish that it was better, but we have so much great music here, and it's particularly in classical music. And there are a lot of American pieces that have stood the test of time, and I would love to see more American music in Europe. Of course, we hear a lot of the European music here in these halls, Beethoven, Bach, and Bartok, and those pieces are wonderful, absolutely amazing, but we can't take away from what American composers have done in the canon of classical music, and I'd love to see more of a cultural exchange, and I'm doing my part, as a composer, and so many other composers are doing their part, but yeah.
Tell me about Ring Shout.
Well, Ring Shout is, it's this one movement of this particular piece called Four Black American Dances, and this is the first movement in this piece. The Ring Shout was a dance that was practiced by enslaved Africans, and it was a time when they finished, and working in the fields and plantations in the South. It's really well known in the Carolinas and Georgia islands, and they got gathered in a circle and would dance in the circle in the rink, and of course shouting, and there would be one person. And usually a man who had a wooden stick on a wooden floor, and would beat a rhythm, people would dance to this rhythm in the circle. And there's so many accounts from writers at that time who experienced it, and they wrote about it and said it was ecstatic, because it would get faster and faster and faster. And so I wanted to, and there's footage of this, of being passed down from generation to generation. And so, of course, I use all these different resources to capture this ring shout within the orchestra. So I even have one of the players in the percussion section to play on the floor, the wooden floor, with the wooden stick to create the rhythm, in which the orchestra is sort of surrounding with very, very energetic and ecstatic, moving passages. And it really builds. And so the idea, you get the sense that there are people dancing in a circle and just having a good time. And, this is what I wanted to portray in this particular movement. But the piece as a whole really represents the different aspects of Black American life and the different aspects of how Black people are not a monolith. There's so many different types of people in the Black American community. And dance is just a representation of how we have expressed ourselves. And the ring shout is one of those dances. The waltz, for instance, is another dance in the 20s and the 30s and well into the 50s. And now there were many Black Americans who were doing well in terms of economically, and they were, aspiring to do, to kind of come out of that Jim Crow and fight racism economically. And so what they did, they would assimilate, and so they would, have debutante balls for their young so they could marry within, the community of the well-to-do, if you will. And they often danced to waltz, the waltzes which we think of as this European style of music. But it was essentially an assimilation to their white counterparts. And so I wanted to use this waltz to show that it was a different type of Black American who was assimilating, The third movement is a tap dance. We think of Cab Calloway and the Nicholas Brothers, Duke Ellington, thinking the big band era. And so I have embedded the tap dance within the percussion section. So you'll hear them playing on the rim of the snare, and so to create this tapping. And of course, there are rhythms, and the harmonies are basically represent, are portraying the big band style of the 30s and the 40s. And finally, the holy dance, which is one of my closest representations, if you will, because my dad's a preacher, and I actually come from a long line of preachers. And on Sunday morning, I play in my dad's church on organ, and so I experienced this dance every Sunday. It was a time where people will come and celebrate. And in the Black Pentecostal churches is, if you haven't been, it's very charismatic and very spontaneous. And so the music has to go along with that. And oftentimes people, they danced and shouted, and, charismatic worship was basically encouraged. It wasn't just sitting out the pew and, and look around no, it was exuberant and spontaneous. And so I wanted to embed that into the orchestra. So you have these 4 dances, which represents many different types of Black American life.
And you mentioned the special percussion effect that you have in ring shout. There's lots for the percussion to do, and some special instruments there too. We've got the slap that we hear in Sleigh Ride, I think, but some other things are going on in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I consider this as a percussion concerto in many ways because, they're being used a lot. I have in the last movement, Holy Dance, there's an instrument called the whip, and it basically sounds like a hand clap, and I have 2 people sort of imitating the church of a hand, like people clapping on beats 2 and 4, and of course, there's so many different aspects to the percussion. The xylophone playing this rhythm that sounds like a sort of a Hammond organ, and then even some of the brass, which is I think this another family that I use quite a bit in this piece. Particularly in the last movement, I have the trombone choir singing like a gospel choir, if you will, and so they're playing in a heavy vibrato style, actually stand up like a choir, and it's like they're singing. They are the choir. They are the gospel choir. So I wanted to, in as much as I could, embed this culture into the symphonic orchestra.
Love when they stand. That's always wonderful, dramatic. Mahler has the horns stand, but you've got the trombones on their feet.
Sure.
You put it in a score? Stand here?
It's in the score. I even tell them when to sit.
And it is jazzy. I mean, it's like Slide Hampton or J.J. Johnson when the three of them are wailing there. It's really great.
Sure. Well, I think it's special because my mom played trombone in church. So it's really a homage to her. You know, in fact, I took a video today in rehearsal and I sent it to her and I said, "Hey, this is because of you," you know. And she always responds like a thumbs up, you know. So I always kind of take this particular movement with me because it really pays respect to my upbringing.
And at rehearsal, you were at the front of the stage. Manfred didn't turn around to confer with you very much. At some point, you were clapping along too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we talked before rehearsal, so we were, you know, we've been communicating about different musical ideas, and you know, it's better for him because he's on the podium and he can relay those ideas. But it's been great to work with him this week because he's open to my ideas. That dance between conductor and composer is usually not so. The relationship is not so clear, you know, especially when you're giving notes to an orchestra of 80 people on stage, you know. But he's been great. You know, allows me to, you know, to give my notes to the individual players, and so that it's been great. It's been great.
It's a masterpiece, Carlos.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So is your passion, according to Mary Cardwell Dawson?
That's right. This is Pittsburgh, yes. Mary Cardwell Dawson, who was a legend. She started an opera company, and I believe in the 50s. And, you know, she's a black opera singer in herself, but she wanted to create a platform for opera singers who were black to perform, which in the 50s and 60s was not a thing. And so she created this company so that they could perform the great masterpieces like Carmen and Aida. And, you know, she did it here in Pittsburgh. And so I created, along with my collaborator, Sandra Seaton, an opera/play about this great woman, Mary Cardwell Dawson. And it's been performed in many places. In North Carolina, it's premiered at the Kennedy Center. And I believe it's done here.
Have you met Janae Solomon yet? She's trying to rebuild the house, you know. A lot of money needs to be raised. Sure. Wonderful woman.
Yeah, I have not, but I've heard so much about this house that Mary Cardwell Dawson had, and it's with how so many artists and so many different types of people would come through this house and stay, and it'd be a safe place for many people. So I'd love to go and visit. I haven't been to the house, but I've heard so many things about it.
We'll get you there for sure. But while you're here, up at our city-county building on Grant Street, just a couple blocks away from where you're staying, we have a whole exhibit about the house and Mary Cardwell Dawson. And you are mentioned in the exhibit in one of the display boards with a signed, autographed photo of Mary Cardwell Dawson for Ahmad Jamal, who studied piano with her. And she writes, "Dear Frederick, you have wonderful talent." You know, his name was Frederick before he was Ahmad Jamal. All those great people that floated through the house. I'm so glad that you're a part of that amazing history.
Yeah, it's such an incredible experience, and I'm grateful. You never know how these things kind of work out, but the universe and God is sort of like, you know, putting me in the right places with the right people.
I wish I could have heard the Washington performance. You were pleased with the way it came together in D.C.
Absolutely. Whenever Denise Graves was involved, are you kidding me? She was the lead. She played Mary Cardwell Dawson. And it was incredible. And she premiered the work actually in Glimmerglass, which is a festival for opera in the summer up in upstate New York. And she premiered the work like almost 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Her big moment, what is she singing in your music? What did you write for her?
So there are two arias. One is called "Rebellious Bird," which really represents her. She's contemplating her life, and these arias are really meant to kind of for her to go inside and, you know, have an introspective moment. And she's describing herself as a rebellious bird. And there are many moments where she's, of course, coaching these young singers. But there are moments when she goes inside, and that's what I've composed arias for her to have these moments.
Oh my, we got to get it out further. It's got to be heard more often, more places. So I'm glad Pittsburgh is a part of that for sure. What's on your writing table? What are you working on now? When's the next premiere?
Well, the next premiere is in Los Angeles. I've written a mass. It's called Good News Mass. And the premiere will be in April. Gustavo Dudamel conducting with the LA Philharmonic. And it's for choir, orchestra, and soloists. And it will actually have a visual element to it. So I've commissioned a videographer / director, Melina Mezoukas, who's an incredible legend of her own. And the performance is, the piece is about 45 minutes long, which is the longest piece I've written to date, including orchestra and choir. And it's a good news mass. So, I've going back to my roots of the church and using the mass as a platform or structure to basically spread the good news, that someone loves you. Whether you believe in God or whatever, you're agnostic, you're atheist or not, but the idea that someone loves you ultimately. And that's really the message of the piece. And so I'm really excited about that work and that premiere, which will be in April.
I wish you could have met Mr. Rogers, our Fred Rogers. He made all his programs at WQED.
Yeah.
He believed exactly what you believe.
Yeah.
And that was his message to get out there.
It's incredible. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, and the piano, the music was just so special, and that's a lot of my inspiration. When I write music, I'm thinking about how can this help someone, and I think that's what he represented with his shows and the music that was in the actual productions.
I am the grandson of a minister, and my grandfather wanted me to be a minister. I bet your dad wanted you to be a preacher.
Absolutely, he does. And I always tell him that music is my pulpit. And I use music to help people. And he's like, okay, fair enough. Touche. But no, he's always been an inspiration, along with my grandfather and my great-grandfather, who were preachers. And in fact, the women in my family, they weren't preachers per se, but they also had, I would say, a gift for bringing people together, which is essentially what my family has done, for over 100 years. My great-grandfather started the church in 1927. And, that it was a way to bring folks together, and I see pictures of him when he first started the church, and, these were people from the community. And they would come every single week needing some type of spiritual growth, some type of spiritual relief, if you will. And it was also a place for community to build. And I think that I do that with my music, and it's more evangelistic, if you will. And so, and what I mean by that is that I'm here in Pittsburgh, but the music could be played in Washington, D.C., or in the UK, or in Los Angeles. And the great thing is I don't have to be there. The music speaks on its own. So I do feel like I'm an extension of that legacy.
The spirit rises on the radio too. It gets out there further.
That's right. And it's such a tremendous blessing, that I get to do this, and I love it. I'm very passionate about my work and what it can do for the community, which we need.
You have been composer in residence at the Kennedy Center. How long is the term?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been there since 2021, and I just extended my contract last year until 2027. And it's been a great platform for me to write music and to express my artistic voice. And, as long as they will have me, I will continue to do that. And it's been a wonderful place to express who I am as a composer. And I've always felt that artists should reflect the times in which we live. And I will certainly continue to do that as long as I'm able.
I read in the paper this morning the Kennedy Center has a new boss, and the board is changing all around. These are crazy times we're living in, Carlos.
Yeah, it's exactly right. But again, I as a composer and as an artist, my job is to reflect the times in which we live, and I will do that, as long as I'm able to. at the Kennedy Center or wherever I am in residence, or so the music will reflect where we are in society.
How are you feeling about where we are as a society? You know, I lived through the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. We had Black Panthers, we had Stokely Carmichael, we had lots of revolution, lots of change. But sometimes I feel, have we moved very far ahead? We always hope that we're getting better, that we're moving further ahead, but you're putting a spotlight on whether we're going forward or not, are you not?
Well, I don't know if that's the case or not. I mean, that's for historians to prove later. I just know where we are in the moment. You know, I want to have my music represent. It may not be the whole society, but it can be a view of where we are in society, and hopefully provide a different perspective that one may not even be aware of, and that's the whole point of art. It's meant to showcase stories and to showcase a perspective that one may not even be aware of. For instance, this piece for Black American Dances, I'm hoping that there are people who may not have heard of a ring shout or may not have heard of the Holy Dance coming out of Black Pentecostal Church, and may hear it and say, wow, that's incredible, I have never heard of that. And will want to do research on their own to show and to find out about this dance, but also about the culture and where it came from. And so it opens you up to a different world. And I hope to do that with my music and whatever the more pieces that I write as the years come.
Thank you so much, Carlos Simon. Please come back soon. Keep it up. Keep the wonderful pen flowing, whatever compositional materials and methods you use. It's working.
Well, I hope so. Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate it.